Hi, I'm Ash and welcome to this video where we look at wingfoil progression and what order to learn things. This is something I get asked quite often down at the beach. I can jibe now, what should I learn next? Or should I be learning to foot switch now, or is there something else I should be learning instead? And these are important questions because you can miss steps, you can try to learn something and not have done the precursor to learning that, which makes it much harder to learn the thing you're trying to do. So if we put things into a basic order where you learn the basics first and these lead into the more advanced things, then you can make sure that you don't get stuck on something where the reason you're struggling is that you haven't learned the things that lead up to it. There is also a question of what kit you should be using to learn what maneuvers, and this again comes into there are some things that are easy to learn on your beginner foil and there are some things that are much easier to learn on a more advanced intermediate foil, and we want to make sure we're using the right kit to learn the right things. So this video takes a normal beginner wingfoiler and talks through the steps of progression to a good intermediate level, making sure that the order you learn things supports the things you want to learn and that you don't miss out some important steps in your progression journey. In this video, we aren't going to look at the really early first steps. Obviously we need to learn to get on the board, then stand up with the wing, then pump onto foil. Now we are foiling, and this is where the what next questions start. Now if we are using a big stable board, then the what next is to learn to slow down and gently come back off of foil to a taxiing speed. We can also, once we're back at a taxiing speed, learn to turn the board around whilst off foil, so a jibe effectively, but not a jibe that is on foil. This gets us to the point where we're going back and forth from the beach, but we're coming off foil in order to turn around. The next step is to get that turnaround or that jibe on the foil. This is the hillside to toe side jibe, and it is the first on foil maneuver that you will learn. If you want to learn that jibe, then I have a breakdown video on it, which I'll put a link for on the top right of the screen. The hillside to toe side jibe tends to be a real sticking point for beginners and can take a long time to learn. The reason for this is that when you do your hillside to toe side jibe, you exit into toe side, which is something to learn in its own right. This causes many beginners to believe they can't jibe, because when they get to toe side, they fall in. The reality is that they can jibe, but what they can't do is ride toe side. And that is in fact the next thing to learn. Again, if you want to learn toe side, then I have a whole breakdown video on that, and I'll link it in the top right. So now you're riding toe side, and here is where a very common question gets raised. Should you learn to foot switch now, or should you learn to hillside to toe side jibe? The answer to this is that you should learn to toe side to hillside jibe. The reason for this is that it is easier than foot switching. In fact, the toe side to hillside jibe is easier than the hill to toe jibe because you exit into your familiar stance. The wing handling for the toe side to hillside jibe is also easier than the hill to toe side jibe, so definitely learn this one next, as it is really quite an easy one compared to the initial phase of learning to jibe. Make sure that you learn your jibes in both stances. Don't just learn to do things in your strong stance. So learn your jibes left foot forwards and then learn your jibes right foot forwards, both for your heel to toe side jibes and also for your toe side to hillside jibes. Don't miss one out. Don't just practice your jibes on your strong stance. At this point, we are jibing both directions on foil. So where now? This is where you can split into two different paths. You can now learn to foot switch from toe side back to hillside, and you can learn this for your strong and weak stance. Alternatively, you can learn the race jibe, which is a very useful jibe for light wind foiling, much easier than trying to do a normal jibe in light wind. If you typically sail in very light winds, then I would highly recommend learning the race jibe first. If you sail in predominantly strong winds, then learning to foot switch is a good option. Something to bear in mind with foot switching is don't leave it too late to learn. Foot switching is much easier to learn on your very stable beginner foils than it is later on with much smaller, more carvy, pitchy intermediate foils. So having that beginner foil stability really helps with learning to foot switch. Alternatively, if you do decide that you're going to learn foot switching later, then if you've still got your beginner gear, switch back onto that in order to do your initial learning. If you've chosen to learn the race jibe, then I have a breakdown video of that manoeuvre and I'll put a link top right. At this point you again have two options. You can do the normal to toe side foot switch, or you can learn the Heineken jibe. This is where progression gets interesting, because foilers who haven't learned the race jibe will tend to want to learn the hillside to toe side foot switch, as that is the easiest, most reliable jibe to do in light wind, so being able to switch feet to access it becomes important. Foilers who have learned to race jibe won't necessarily need to learn the hillside to toe side foot switch to have a reliable light wind jibe in their back pocket, as that is exactly what the race jibe delivers. There aren't a lot of other reasons to switch from hillside to toe side stance, other than to access the toe side to hillside jibe, or to access a toe side to hillside tack or something along those lines. For me personally, I almost never feel like I need to do this switch, as I have both the Heineken and race jibe for light winds, and I can do a hillside to toe side tack, so I don't actually need to do the switch in order to make a tack. If you want to learn the Heineken jibe, then I have a breakdown video for that, and I'll link it top right. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop for a moment and summarise what we have so far in a bit of a progression flowchart. Okay, so we're going to look at the left side of the diagram here, which is the stuff that we've mostly covered so far. And to summarise, we start out being able to foil, and the next thing we learn is coming down from foil, and the reason we're coming down from foil is because we need to be able to do that just to stop and get off at the beach, but also when you're first learning to turn or do a jibe, you do taxi jibes, you don't do them on foil. As soon as you decide that you do want to do them on foil, that's the next thing with the hill to toe jibe, and the hill to toe jibe exits into toe side, so the next thing you need to learn after that is toe side riding. And then following toe side riding is the toe to heel jibe, so that's jibing out of toe side back to your normal stance. And at this point we have some different directions we can go, some of which I've talked about and some of which I haven't. The stuff that I have talked about is the toe to heel foot switch, which is one option, or the next option is the race jibe. There is a third thing that you can learn here, which is in this chart because this is a reasonable point to start learning it, and that's flagging out to wave ride. So if you're somewhere where there are waves, then once you've mastered your various jibes, jibing to toe side, then jibing back out again, then now's the time to start looking at, if you have waves, learning to flag out to ride waves. And you can do the flagged out jibe after that, and you can do all of the wave riding options like the bottom turn, top turn, and all that stuff can be done as part of your wave riding progression. And the reason it's separate here and sort of doesn't lead anywhere is because wave riding is a thing in its own right. It doesn't lead to any other particular manoeuvres. You learn to wave ride and it's a progression in of itself. It's not related to other wing foiling progression. The other thing we talked about was the race jibe, and again you'll see here that after the race jibe you can go on to the Heineken jibe, which I have talked about, but you can also learn the duck jibe, And the duck jibe is basically a race jibe, but you do your hand switch on the back handle, so you let go of the front handle and spin the wing and do the jibe just on the back handle. And then you can do the double duck jibe, which is when the wing spins around a couple of times, which is just a kind of a bit of a flourish on the duck jibe. And I didn't mention the duck jibe because it's essentially a race jibe, but with the handle switch done slightly differently. And then the last thing at the bottom of this diagram is foot switching. So that's learning your toe to heel foot switch if you didn't already do it before the race jibe, and your heel to toe switch you can do at this point if you want to do the heel to toe switch. I don't find it a particularly useful skill, so I don't particularly do heel to toe switches, because I can do toe to heel tacks and I can do heel to toe tacks, so I'm never in a situation where I need to do that foot switch. Now, the reason that we come all the way down this left hand side to foot switching and then we go back up to the top on the other side is because this is where it's useful to have an equipment change. Everything on the left side of this diagram that we've covered so far can be done on your beginner foil. You can do all of this stuff on a beginner foil, and specifically, as I mentioned, it's a good idea to do your foot switching on your beginner foils where you've got a really big stabiliser and lots of stability in the board. But when you come over to the right hand side of this diagram, this is where you start to benefit from having some glide in your foils, and this is where high aspect foils, for example, or more just generally more glidey foils or faster foils start to become useful. Smaller tail stabilizers that aren't slowing you down massively. These will really help in this next set of maneuvers where you're going to be letting go of the wing and not be under power, for instance, and you want lots of glide or time in order to complete your maneuver. So this right hand side of the diagram is normally where we have an equipment switch and we start using more intermediate orientated foils rather than beginner foils. At this stage we are moving away from beginner status and heading more into intermediate territory. For most intermediate foilers, this journey starts with the toe to heel tack. This particular progression point is where you can also have some of your worst crashes in your journey so far. I have a video for the toe to heel tack that I will link top right. The reason this tack is quite crashy is that it's a complex move of the wing and you can get slapped off your board backwards by the wing, but also when this happens you tend to fall forwards while your board rotates backwards and you can find yourself crashing headfirst towards your foil, which is really quite uncomfortable, so fair warning. Once we have the toe to heel tack unlocked, then it is time to put together two moves we can already do and create what is an easy 360. Basically we ride toe side, do a toe side to heel side tack, and then immediately after the tack we do a jibe, and this effectively has us foil in a full circle, so it's a 360. Some people call it the cheat 360, but regardless it is a full 360 on foil, and if done seamlessly can look quite nice. This inevitably leads into wanting to do the 360 properly with a downwind 360. This move has an entry in like a race jibe and an exit out a little bit like a tack, and in the middle we have a tiny bit of backwind riding. The downwind 360 is really a pivotal maneuver as it introduces you to some advanced wing handling that will lead into doing other more complex things later in this progression journey. The 360 can also be split into three different styles, and they are typically learned as the wingtip drag 360, the backwind 360 and the umbrella 360. I have a video on this coming soon, or if you're watching this in the future then it may already be on my channel. After learning the downwind 360, it's time to get into the heel to toe side tack. This is a really fast and committed maneuver, but super satisfying to do. I have a video for the hillside tack and I'll link that top right. At this point things really split, as we are now getting to a point where we are quite an accomplished foiler and there are various paths open to us. A fairly simple progression is to do the Heineken jibe that then goes into a tack, also known as the wing swing 360, but it is once again just combining two moves you've already mastered into a 360, and this one does look quite good and feels nice to perform. Following that we can do the upwind 360, which is quite a hard one to do. It's again a very committed and fast manoeuvre, but a different variation on the 360 theme. We can also start working on more complex jibes and tacks, like the behind the back tack or the wing pass jibe, or indeed one of the many other more complex jibes. Lastly, we'll have experienced a little bit of backwind riding in learning the backwind 360, and we can expand upon this and branch out into extended backwind riding with a backwind tack or jibe to exit. I've got a video on backwind riding and I'll link that top right. This really marks the end of the progression to intermediate, and from here we're really moving into expert foiling. At this stage you really have the skills to tackle any of the follow-on tricks and can tackle new moves in the order you prefer. That is except for jumping, which I'll come on to in our summary, and for that we need to go back to our progression chart. Okay, so here we are back in our progression chart, and the right hand side of the diagram is where we're working, and this is really where you move into the territory of being a very solid intermediate wingfoiler. First thing at the top there is the toe to heel tack, and as I said in the detailed explanation, this is probably, of all the maneuvers within this chart, the one that has the worst crashes, so just be prepared for that. You might get lucky and not have any bad ones, but you do tend to end up falling towards your foil, and that is quite uncomfortable. After you've done the toe to heel tack, then you can see that there is a bit of a split here, because you may be somebody who's interested in going on to do more foiling type maneuvers, or you may be somebody who is a freestyle orientated foiler and you want to get into basic jumps and then freestyle jumps. So once you've done the toe to heel tack, you've really finished the basics of foiling, and you can go any direction you want to at that point. Jumps could be one of them, more complicated foiling maneuvers could be the other. So if you're into freestyle, then obviously go off down the jump route. If you're into more foiling type maneuvers, then the next one would be the tack into the jibe 360. So this is what I call the cheat 360, but it's basically putting together two maneuvers that you already know how to do. And then once you can do that, then you're probably going to feel like you are cheating doing the 360 and you want to do it properly, and you can then move on to the downwind 360, which has the three variants that I mentioned. You've got the wing drag 360, the backwinded 360, and the umbrella 360. Following on from that, we then have the heel to toe tack, and the reason that I leave the heel to toe tack until a little bit later is because it's a really fast committed jibe, and it requires a lot of confidence to go into a heel to toe tack at speed and then do the wing switch at speed as well. Fortunately, unlike the toe to heel tack, the crashes are fairly benign. You just fall in backwards when you get it wrong, so it's not too bad of a manoeuvre to learn, but it does require a lot of commitment and speed and a lot of changes in your balance and shifting of your body position, and that's why I put it after the tack into jibe 360 and the downwind 360, because it's just a little bit more committed to complete that one. And then at this point we actually split once again, and you can go down the route of backwind riding, or you can go down the route of doing behind the back tack, wing past jibe and other more complex jibes, or you can go further into 360s and do the Heineken to tack 360 and the upwind 360. So various different routes. If you go backwind riding, then the first thing you're going to do once you learn to backwind ride is you're going to want to come out of it again, and actually what you'll probably do by accident by pushing too far upwind is tack out. You'll be backwind riding, trying to go as high upwind as you can, and you'll accidentally tack out of it. So that's why the tack out is there first, because you're probably going to do it accidentally. And then after that you've got the backwind jibe out, which is a little bit harder to complete, but as long as you rotate the wing quickly, it's actually quite easy, and I have a tutorial on that. Underneath the heel to toe tack we have the Heineken jibe to the tack 360, or the wing swing 360, which is actually quite a nice pretty looking manoeuvre. And then after that we've got another very committed manoeuvre which has a similar start to the heel to toe tack, which is the upwind 360, but this is again a very fast, very speed orientated and aggressive manoeuvre to complete. And then the final area on the right there is your more complex jibes, which I've already gone over. So I hope this progression chart's been useful. I'm sure there will be people who disagree with the order that I've put them in, but this is, from my perspective, having learned all of these things, the easiest route through these, where you basically build on things that you've learned before in order to move yourself forwards. Okay, so that's everything for this video. I hope it's been useful. I know it's been a long one, so congratulations if you made it all the way to the end here, and I'll see you on the next video.